What's going on, YouTube? This is SG1 Sports, and you're watching our college football channel. We didn't see a big shakeup or anything in the top 10 this week, but outside of the top 10, there were actually a lot of changes this week. A lot of teams lost. A lot of teams that were maybe ranked low in the top 25 had big wins, and they're going to be moving up. So I think we will see a lot of movement outside of the top 9 or 10 teams, but at the top, of course, not really going to see much change. I'm going to project what the playoff committee will do with their rankings this week. If you watched last week's video, I think I was very accurate with my projection, except for North Carolina and Texas, which I still don't understand. It makes absolutely no sense to me where they ranked they didn't rank Texas at all and where they ranked North Carolina, but that's another topic. So I'm going to project the top 25, what the committee is going to do. Again, keep in mind, this is what I think the committee is going to do, but I'm going to do something different this week. The last couple of weeks for my top 25, I said I didn't want to just have a top 25 that was just like the playoff rankings, so I just did the top 25 that was based off of who I thought would win if teams played head-to-head. No resume, nothing like that. I just ranked the teams based on who I thought would win. Personally, just kind of my opinion, doing something a little bit different. But the committee is so off from what I would do with the top 25, and I think so off from what they're supposed to do, that I'm going to give you an actual top 25, what I think the playoff rankings should look like. So this will be my top 25 poll, and again, a normal top 25 poll. Then I'll give you the projections for what I think the committee is going to do. So this is how I think the playoff rankings should look. This would be my playoff rankings. All right, so this is my top 25, and again, this is how I think the committee should rank the teams, and if they follow their criteria, I believe this is how they would rank the top 25. Alabama still number 1, Clemson or Notre Dame at number 2, Clemson number 3. I agree with that. I think the committee is doing what they're supposed to do with those top 3 teams. I believe Texas A&M and Florida should be ranked ahead of Ohio State. Although Indiana's win over Wisconsin makes me more willing to put Ohio State there at number 4, but still, when you look at the overall resumes for A&M and Florida, they're just much better than Ohio State. If they had beat Indiana convincingly, if they had won that game by 20 points, then okay, I'd put the Buckeyes at number 4. But for me, when you look at the criteria that they're supposed to follow, A&M and Florida would be 4 and 5. A&M ahead of Florida because of the head-to-head. But if Ohio State wins the Big Ten championship, I would move them ahead of A&M and Florida, because one of the big criteria is conference champions. So Ohio State, in my opinion, would go ahead of A&M and Florida if they win the Big Ten. But for right now, where I would rank them, I'd put them at number 6, Cincinnati at number 7. I'd put Coastal Carolina at number 8, and I do not think the committee is going to rank them this high, but I think they should be. You look at their resume. They have a win over BYU and Louisiana, 2 top 25 teams. They also have a win over Appalachian State, who's a pretty good team as well, and they have no losses. There's no reason, and you could really make an argument that Coastal Carolina should be ahead of Cincinnati. And I think you could even make an argument that they could be ahead of Ohio State, because when you look at their wins, they've got 2 top 15, top 20 wins on their resume. Very impressed with Coastal Carolina. The difference is really, I guess, how close the games have been. Coastal Carolina hasn't maybe been as dominant as Cincinnati, and you're not supposed to look at the win margin if you're the playoff committee, but you do look at just kind of how dominant a team has been, and game control, all those things that they look at. And so that's why I think Cincinnati should still be ahead of Coastal Carolina. I think Cincinnati has also put together some pretty good wins, and they have a chance to get a top 25 win over Tulsa coming up. So I've got Cincinnati, then Coastal Carolina. I've got Indiana at number 9. They played Ohio State tough, a top 6 team, really maybe a top 5, top 4 team. They played them tough. That's their only loss. They also beat Wisconsin. That's a pretty solid win. So I think Indiana, with that one loss, deserves to be at number 9. You look at Georgia at number 10. Their 2 losses, Alabama and Florida, those are really good losses, but now all of a sudden, who have they beat? Auburn was really their best win. Auburn has now lost 4 games. So I think Georgia really does not deserve to be ranked higher than number 10. I know the committee's had them a little bit higher than that, but I've got the Bulldogs at number 10 just because the losses that they have had have been to 2 top 5 teams. And, you look at some of these other teams, if Miami had played Alabama and Florida, They would have lost both times. And really, probably Indiana would have as well. Coastal Carolina, Cincinnati. So you can see why it's not right to penalize Georgia. They shouldn't be way down in the rankings because they lost to two really good teams. But the reason I can't put them higher, the reason I can't put them at, say, number 7 is because they just don't have that win right now. And I guess they're not going to get it. So Georgia at 10, Miami at number 11. Then we have Louisiana at number 12, another team that I think has really been disrespected by the committee. This is a team that beat a top 10, according to the committee, a top 10 Iowa State team. Their one loss came to an undefeated Coastal Carolina. This team has been really impressive. They just beat App State. There's no reason for Louisiana to be barely in the top 25. And I don't see how you can put them, if you're following the criteria, I don't see how you can put them behind Iowa State. They beat them head-to-head. They have one less loss. I know Iowa State's playing, they're different right now. It's a different team. But you have to look at the entire season. You have to look at the entire body of work. And to me, Louisiana deserves to be ahead of Iowa State. I've got them all the way at number 12, then Iowa State, and then Oklahoma. You separate those two teams because of the head-to-head. USC at number 15, looking much better now in their last couple of games. And they're undefeated. So I don't really see, they're playing Power 5 teams. It's not like they're playing cupcakes. And I know the Pac-12 is not very good, but still, I think they deserve to be around number 15. BYU at 16. They had a chance against Coastal Carolina. To me, there's not a whole lot that separates those two teams. The problem for BYU, though, is they just don't have any good wins. That's why I can't put them higher than 16. Colorado at 17. Very similar to USC. They've had some good wins. But they just don't have a great win because they're playing in the Pac-12. So I think USC's been a little bit more impressive, but Colorado's definitely in that same conversation. Northwestern at number 18, Texas at 19, 20 is Oklahoma State. Oklahoma State, after watching this past week, it's hard to imagine this team being ranked. But at the same time, Texas lost to TCU, and Oklahoma State does have that win over Tulsa, who I think is a top 25 team. And so I think you have to go just like Louisiana, Iowa State, and Oklahoma, that cluster of 3 teams. You do the same thing here with Texas, Oklahoma State, and Tulsa, 19, 20, and 21. And then I've got Buffalo at number 22. There's no reason for them not to be ranked. I know they're playing in the MAC, but if you look at the way they've won their games, they've been dominant, very similar to what BYU had, and they were at, 13, 14 in the last rankings. Buffalo deserves to be ranked. You look at a team like San Jose State, they're undefeated as well, but Buffalo has been much more impressive in their wins. And then I have Iowa and Wisconsin. Hard to really see Wisconsin being ranked, but I'm going to put them there at number 24. And again, I can understand, because they just haven't played that many games. But when you look at how they've played against good competition, against Indiana and Northwestern, they were very close in those games. So I think you still rank Wisconsin. And I actually think the playoff committee is going to have them higher than this, and I'll show you that in a second. And then at number 25, we've got North Carolina. The committee loves North Carolina. I have a hard time ranking them just because they don't have any quality wins. I know they were competitive against Notre Dame, but they were not in my top 25 last week. Now they're at number 25 just because I had to put somebody there. And then NC State is looking pretty good. San Jose State, like I said, undefeated. Liberty has the 1 loss. Missouri is sitting there with just 3 losses. And UCF, they were very close in some of their games, and they have 3 losses as well. But they've been pretty impressive, especially when you look at all the players that opted out and have left the team or been kicked off the team, whatever. UCF has been impressive. So that would be my top 25. That's how I think the committee should rank these teams. But I'm going to tell you now how I think the committee will rank these teams. So these are my official projections. This is how I think 21 through 25 will go. I think NC State comes in there at number 25. Colorado, they won't get any respect. They weren't ranked last week. Tulsa won't get any respect. I think, again, Texas, Oklahoma State will stay, or Texas comes back into the rankings. They beat Oklahoma State head-to-head. I thought they would have stayed ahead of them last week. And these teams both lost to TCU, so that's similar. So I think they have to be kind of in that same spot. And you could say, well, how can you put Oklahoma State in here? They just lost. Well, there was really no team. There were no teams that could move up into the top 25. No one was really all that impressive. That's why there's not a bunch of new teams in here, even though if this was early in the season, we would have had a bunch of teams fall out of the top 25, but we just didn't have anything with teams that were just outside the top 25 where they deserve to get in. So that's why I still have Oklahoma State ranked, and I think Texas will be there at number 21. Here's 16 through 20. Louisiana, again, I don't see them getting much respect because they haven't so far. The Coastal Carolina beating BYU helps Louisiana, but again, I don't really think the committee is going to give them much credit. Wisconsin doesn't deserve to be at number 19, but I think the committee is going to put them at 19 just based off of how they view them. And remember last week, North Carolina lost and they moved up. So just because you lose doesn't mean you're going to fall way down. The committee looks at the entire body of work, and I think Wisconsin will be there at number 19. Iowa at number 18 at 5-2, a couple of really close losses. I think BYU is at 17. It's an interesting team to try to figure out. It's possible they drop way down, even out of the top 25, just because they don't have any, great wins. But if Coastal Carolina is a top 20, top 15 team, and BYU on the road took them down to the wire, you have to say, well, yeah, BYU is a similar team to Coastal Carolina. So I think the committee will go that route, and they will keep them ranked and not drop them too much. I have them at 17, but they love North Carolina. I have no idea why. I think they probably put them at 16 this week, which I think is way too high. I think you can make an argument that North Carolina does not even deserve to be ranked, which I did have them barely in there. But yeah, 16 is probably where the committee is going to put them. 11 through 15, I think USC up to number 15. And again, USC and Colorado should not be, they should be pretty close in the rankings, but they won't be just because of the name brands. And I think the committee has made it clear that they look at that. Northwestern at number 14. Coastal Carolina, I think, moves up to 13 where BYU was, but I don't think the committee is going to give them the respect that they deserve, and they're not going to move them much higher than that. Oklahoma at number 12. Miami at number 11. Miami drops a little bit, not because of anything they did, but again, you have to look at the entire body of work of every team. You do a new top 25 each week, and I think Indiana is going to move up. So we go to 6 through 10. I think Indiana goes to number 10. Because of that win over Wisconsin, they now have a good win over Wisconsin, a close loss to Ohio State. They played 7 games. They've only played one fewer game than Cincinnati and Georgia. And so you look at some of these teams in the Big Ten and say, well, they've only played a few games. Well, Indiana has played all their games, and they're not that far behind the other conferences. It's sitting there at 7 games. So I think Indiana will get some credit this week. I could see them maybe moving up to number 8 because of that game against Wisconsin. But I don't know. The committee really seems to like Georgia and Iowa State. So I didn't move Indiana any higher than this. But again, don't be shocked if you see Indiana at number 8. I think that helps Ohio State out a lot. Gives them a very solid win. And I think overall just kind of helps the Big Ten out. I think Cincinnati will still be there at number 7. Florida at number 6 after a so-so performance against Tennessee. It was, a good win, but not super impressive. And then we go to the top 5. Again, I don't see any change here. A&M at number 5. They beat Auburn. Struggled at times in this game, but really they dominated. I know the scoreboard doesn't show that necessarily, but if you look at the yards in this game and just the line of scrimmage, A&M dominated this game. Ohio State stays at number 4. Very impressed with their win over Michigan State. The team was shorthanded, didn't have Ryan Day and some of their starters, but they got the win. Clemson stays at 3, Notre Dame at number 2, Alabama number 1. No real drama here. And as long as the favorites win out, Alabama will be number 1. Clemson, they're going to be favored over Notre Dame. They'll be number 2. Notre Dame will be 3 or 4. Ohio State will be 3 or 4. And that's what the playoff is going to look like. Unless we see some upsets. And honestly, it doesn't feel like we're going to see them. We're waiting for that big upset, that big thing to happen that's going to shake everything up like it always does. And it's just not happening this year. So in a year of craziness, we get down to the college football playoff and we get no craziness. So it's definitely odd. No chaos. It's just everything's going as scripted right now. But there's still football to be played and something could still happen. Florida could upset Alabama. Notre Dame could beat Clemson and open the door for another team to get in. These things can absolutely happen. We'll just have to wait and see what does happen. But again, these are my playoff ranking projections. This is how I think the committee is going to do it. We'll see how accurate I am. Again, if you go back to last week, very accurate except for Texas and North Carolina. So I'll be really interested to see what they do with those two teams this week. And maybe there's another team that's a surprise. We'll see. Again, tomorrow night, the rankings will be out. I will do a reaction to that, so watch for that video. Thank you for watching this video, and stay tuned for more here on the SG1 Sports College Football Channel.